Hello and welcome to a quick overview of Excel Tutorial 3 for K201. In this tutorial, we will focus on formulas and functions. Before we get into that topic, let's talk about cell references. There are three types of cell references: relative, absolute, and mixed. Let's say we wanted to refer to the cell E1 in a formula. If we just use E1, that's a relative reference. And what that basically means is from here, which direction is E1? So we can see from here, it is 1, 2, 3 rows up and 1, 2, 3 columns to the right. Okay, so that's how the relative reference is calculated. The absolute reference means the cell E1. No matter where we are, always point to that green cell. The mixed reference, on the other hand, can be one of two types. It can have the row fixed or the column fixed. If the column is fixed, then it is $E1, in which case the column will not change, but the row may change. And the other type is the $1, in which case the row is fixed. So the $sign means don't change what follows. In this case, E1 always remains E1 because of the $signs. How is this used? Let's say we wanted to add those two numbers. The formula we might enter is equals B6 plus C6. Right. Now, I have entered a relative reference in this formula because B6, there are no $signs. That's a relative reference. So what this really means is add the cell that is 2 columns to the left in the same row with the cell that is 1 column to the left in the same row. So when I copy this formula down, it works just fine for the other rows because it means the same thing. Copy 2 cells to the left of this cell in the same row, add it with the cell 1 column to the left, right? So in the same row. So we're always, no matter where we put the formula, we're adding the values in that row. There are times when we want to fix a reference to a particular cell. So if we wanted a 25% of these amounts, where we want to use that cell reference for the 25%, then no matter where we put the formula, we always want to point to the 25. We don't want it to move down as we move the formula down. So what we would do in that case is equals this value. Now this one we will leave it relative because if we're down here in one of the other rows, we want to use the corresponding value times, and we want to use the 25%. So we can press F4 and that will change it into an absolute reference. What the F4 key does is it cycles through the different types of references. So if I press F4 again, it becomes one of the mixed. Here's the other of the mixed type, and here is the relative, and back to absolute again. So those, it will cycle through all of those options. So that is my formula. I'm going to press enter, and when we copy it all the way down to this, through this column, no matter which cell we look at, the formula is the cell to the left on the same row. Okay, so F10 from here, it's F10 is this one, times H3. So every formula multiplies it by H3. So the $sign H and $3 says don't change the H or the 3. Leave it fixed. The mixed reference, what I'm going to do is try to make a formula that can be copied anywhere in this table so we can make a multiplication table. Now what happens in the case of multiplication table is that we want, no matter where we are, we always want to take the leftmost column and multiply it with this fixed row, no matter which row we're in. Okay. To do that, my formula will need to be equals this cell, but again, because I want to fix the column K, I'm going to put a $sign before the K. And we want to multiply that by this 2, but in this case, we want to fix the 4th row. Okay, no matter where we go, we always multiply the 4th row. So we'll fix the 4 with a $sign. I take this formula, copy it down and across to fill the whole table. No matter where I go, I can see that it's multiplying correctly. Now let's move on to the budget. On this worksheet, we're trying to create the Harry and Sally's family budget. Here's Harry's monthly income, Sally's monthly income, and how much they have starting balance in the checking and the savings account. And so there are some things to fill out in here. So let's move on and fill those out one at a time. So first thing we'll do is calculate the total. Now we can use the sum function, for example. So we'll just take a sum of those two values. And to fill the months out, I'm not going to enter every single month. What we'll do is enter the first two, January and February. When we do that, we can highlight both of these and use a feature called autofill. If we know the first two values, Excel tries to figure out the pattern, and then it will use the pattern to fill the rest of the values. Okay. So the pattern it saw was these were month names, and then it filled out the rest of the months. Same thing over here. I can do January and February, and then highlight both of those cells to let Excel figure out the pattern and fill out the rest of that row. Now to copy Harry's monthly salary in here, I need a cell reference to that value. Okay. Now, if I use a relative reference, then when I copy it to February, it's going to move and point to this cell. Now, March is going to point to the next cell, which will be wrong. So what I need to do is make this an absolute reference. Okay, so we will turn this into $D, $3. For Sally, we'll also point to her monthly salary and turn it into an absolute reference. So now we'll go ahead and copy this across all the way to December and enter the formula for sum. Here I'm actually going to not type it in, but show you a different way to enter formulas, and that is the insert function button. From here, it brings up a dialog, and we can type a description, or there are categories. So sum is a math function, and we'll choose that. And what it needs is a cell reference or multiple cell references. And what it figured out was, do you want to add C8 with C9? That looks correct. And here is a preview of the result, 4,100. And we know that's the total. So that's what will be entered here based on the sum of those two values. So we'll go ahead and click OK. Now, let's make sure that this is a relative reference, because when we copy this formula over, we want it to be a sum of this column. When it's here, it's sum of this column. When it's here, it's a sum of that column, so on. So we don't want any dollar signs in the cell references there. And so this sum is a sum of the n column, which is correct. Okay. I've filled in some expenses, and let's go ahead and fill out the remaining. Here, let's make it a fixed expense. So every month the water bill is $24. So I'm just copying it over using the fill handle. Same thing for the phone bill, fill handle, and then copy it over. Now when you have multiple values, you can use the fill handle the same way. You can highlight both cells and use fill handle to copy it over. Now let's go ahead and do the sum again. Equals sum, and then I'm just going to click and drag the range that I need, and then use the fill handle again. Okay, so we know the total monthly income, we know the total monthly expenses, and now let's figure out what's remaining from each month. So equals total income minus the total expense. Okay. And we copy it across. Now in the next section here, what we'll do is, if they save more than $2,500 in a month, then we will put $1,000 in savings, right? And the remaining will go into checking. And if they save less than $2,500, then we'll put $500 in savings and the rest in checking. So I'm going to start over here with the savings. and this is an if function. So let's use our insert function button here. And this is a logical function category. It's a logical test. If and okay. The if function takes three parameters. The first one is a condition. It's a logical test and always results in true or false. And then we have two values. If this result was true, then we will put this value in the cell. Otherwise, we will put the false value in the cell. That's all there is to the if function. If the current month's balance is greater than 2,500, then the savings amount is going to be $1,000. Otherwise, it's going to be $500. Okay, so that's how much goes into the savings. And let's go ahead and copy this across. And then we can see that on the months where it's more than 2,500, like right here, we have $1,000. On some months, we're saving only 500. Okay, that seems to be working so far. So the remaining balance is going to be whatever the balance was minus whatever we put into savings. That's what's left, and that goes into checking. Now we'll take this and copy it across all the way to the end. And again, we can do a sum of all of these values to find out how much will be in the checking and in savings. Then we will have a sum of all of these values. There are better ways to actually make this worksheet, but the main ideas that I wanted to cover that are in the tutorial, I think this one shows you those. And those are the autofill, the if function, and the sum function using the insert function button. Okay, so those kinds of things. Now let's take a look at one more function called payment. Harry and Sally are considering getting a business loan, and they need to know what will be their monthly payment before they even apply for the loan. They know some parameters. They know the loan amount. They need $250,000. The annual interest rate is 5.25%. They're going to be making will be in monthly payment on this loan. And the interest rate per period, we need to figure that out. Well, we know the annual rate, we know how many months are in a year, so we should be able to easily figure out the rate per period. Now, one thing to always remember is that the financial formulas all use rate per period. We never use annual rate. Okay, so we will do this by dividing the annual rate by the number of months. Okay, so we can format this as a percentage, add a couple of decimal places so we don't see just zeros. The loan term is 10 years, and so how many months is that? Well, we know there are 12 months in a year, and the 10 years is going to be, we can just multiply both of those. Number of years times number of months per year, enter. And the monthly payment function, now that is a financial function, so if we go into the financial category, we will find under PMT, the second one there. And first parameter there it needs is the rate. So remember, the rate we need to use is the rate per period, not the annual rate. The number of payments that will be made is right here. And the present value is the loan amount. Okay. And there is the payment. Now, the payment amount comes out as a negative number. That's why it's in red and with parentheses. Now, here's another thing to remember about the financial calculations. Whenever money is leaving your pocket, it is going to be a negative number. Whenever money is coming to you, it is going to be shown as a positive number. So the loan amount here was shown as a positive number. And that's why whenever this payment is made, it comes out as a negative number. Those are all the topics covered in tutorial 3. Thank you for listening.